actually better. So we'll do a little more on the ontological argument then on Friday. Thank you for bringing that up. Okay. Well, so this thing is recording. So the ontological argument then claims to prove God's existence with the certainty of an axiom in in geometry or something. Let me back up. The other arguments, which we're not going to look at right now, we are going to look at the design argument. Forget these three. These are all the cosmological argument, but things in nature have purposeful ends is an assumption of the design argument, but they all get underway by looking at stuff in the world. An a priori argument is entirely abstract. It says, don't worry about how the world is. I can prove the existence of God just from the abstract concept of who God is supposed to be. That's essentially what St. Anselm is claiming here. So it is the word is a priori, which means you can see the root word of prior, prior to and independent of experience. In other words, just from concepts and not from anything about the world, any observations in the world. This argument claims to be able to prove God, okay? So it's based not on sense observations about the world around us, but on a concept about the being of God. That's why they call it the ontological argument. Ontos is the Greek word for existence or being. There's an area of philosophy called ontology, which is mentioned briefly in your text, that deals with the nature of existence. So what is the concept of God that the argument moves from? Well, think about it. If you're looking at this from the standpoint of God as God is traditionally conceived, okay, you say, well, what possible being, if God really created the universe and all that exists, what can be greater than God? Okay? So that's a concept that is the springboard for this argument that gets it underway. So God is a being than which none greater can be thought. God is the greatest being we can think of or imagine. Right? Now, here, when he's calling people fools, he's not trying to be accusatory, but St. Anselm, when he's talking about the fool, it's almost a technical term. He's referring to two verses in the Bible and Psalms that say, the fool hath said in his heart, there is no God. So the person he's talking about as, quote, the fool, is the person who denies God's existence, right? So he's not name-calling. So what about this? Well, this argument raises the issue, can we deny God's existence without falling into contradictions? Now, the claim of St. Anselm is that we cannot. In other words, we can't deny God's existence if we're buying into God as God is traditionally conceived. So, why cannot we do this without contradicting ourselves? Well, the claim of somebody who denies God's existence in brief, is that God exists in the mind and the understanding as a concept. Okay, I can have the concept of God, but the person who denies God's existence says there isn't any being around that fits that concept. So God exists in the mind, but not in reality, is the claim. And this is Anselm's own little illustration. He says, it's one thing to exist in the mind only, but another to exist in reality. He says, it would be one thing for a painting just to exist in the mind of the painter. It's yet another thing after it is painted for the painting to exist in reality on canvas. Now, this, believe it or not, is an assumption that goes back to Plato, but we're not going to, as I said, go into Plato's theory of forms. But for Plato, there are degrees of existence, and that which is greater in reality in its existence also has a larger degree of existence. So if that in which no greater can be thought existed only in the mind, we could think of a greater. In other words, if we say, well, what falls under the concept the greatest being we can think of exists only in the mind, then we say, well, wait a second. If it's greater for a painting to exist in reality than really in the mind, then we could think of something that fit the concept, the greatest being you can think of, who exists in reality. But of course, there isn't any being greater than the greatest being we can think of. So if we're thinking of that being to qualify as the greatest being we can think of has to exist in reality as well as in the mind. This is Anselm's conclusion.
So is that why, like, some cultures worship rocks or hills?
No. Now you're thinking of a view that's sometimes called animism, the view that spirits might inhabit what we would otherwise think of as just, natural objects. That's kind of a different view. Here the view is that if it's greater to exist in reality than in the mind, then the greatest being must have to exist in reality in order to be the greatest being, right? So you're saying if you're thinking of God as the greatest being, we can't think of anything greater, so whatever falls under the concept of the greatest being we can imagine has to exist in reality as well. And if God is that being, then God has to exist in reality. Now we're going to look at an objection that one of Anselm's fellow monks raised to this argument. You got to separate two things, and this will be the last thing because I don't. It's one thing to ask whether God exists. It's another thing to ask whether somebody's argument that they claim proves God's existence really does the job. And Anselm's fellow monk, who was presumably just as devout a believer in God as Anselm, thought that Anselm's particular argument didn't work. So we're going to look at that next time. Guinello? Oh, Descartes is somebody who tried to refine Anselm's original argument.
So Descartes was not a monk?
Descartes was not, no, he was not a monk. He was a Catholic, though. He was a devout Catholic. That's what got him in trouble. But No, he was not a monk.
But Anselm.
But
was-
Guanillo was
And that's the one who.
the monk. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you'll see that if you look at the PowerPoint. And I got to make sure that I have this visible for you all. I'm pretty sure I do. Anyway, we'll stop it there. If anybody missed the roll, make sure you get it on the way out. And if you miss getting a copy of the printout. So, hold on. Wait a second. Yeah. Go ahead, take one. Sure. That's fine. Okay. Pardon? Oh, no. Remember, this is due the day of the test. It's not due till a week from today. Okay, next Wednesday. Friday, we're going to go over a little more of the ontological argument. Monday, we'll have a review. And then...
So all of this is included in one essay, or you want 7 essays?
No. I'm saying choose one of
choose
these
one of
7.
these. Oh.
Yeah. But what I told people is you want to also look at some of the other ones. You can do all 7. No, you wouldn't be. It's not short answer for all 7. It's just choose one of the 7. Okay, but I said look over the other questions because they'll give you an idea. You can use it as a review sheet. I'll be right back.
Sure.
Okay. Are you the class coming in or the classes? Oh, okay. I'll be right back. Mm-hmm. Let's see. Hold up. Let me make sure that I uploaded that. Integrity. Oh, no, I didn't. That's not good.